What's going on, everybody? Welcome in to For the Millie Monday edition here. We're going to bring you guys something new by request. We're going to do a little bit of a recap of yesterday's games. How did we do? What did we get right? What did we get wrong? What did we learn from yesterday's games that we can take into the coming weeks and into tonight's slate? So I will kick it to you, TwoGun. How was your NFL Sunday?
It was mediocre. Let's see. I won a little bit on the Showdown site. I mentioned in our Discord how I like the Texans, and even though they lost, but it just goes to show you that they're the better DFS plays because I won a little bit on the Showdown. I lost a moderate amount on the NFL main slate, but that's just the way it is with GPPs. And it's just I had a few good plays and a few shit ones. Obviously Jordan Addison was shit. Sterling Shepard was shit. I don't know why I had so much Parker Washington, but then again I had a few good plays. Obviously I talked about Bijan in my article. That was great. And I'm kind of kicking myself. I pivoted one of my lineups to a Calvin Ridley, Will Levis stack, which after taking a gummy, I realized that was a good play. And it kind of makes me think sometimes, I need to sometimes I think a little bit clearer when I'm not quite sober. Let's just leave it at that. Because some of the plays, you got to ask yourself, sometimes the plays make sense, they just didn't work. And sometimes the plays don't make sense. And then I missed a few things, Calvin Ridley, who was the most hated quarterback going into last week? It was Will Levis, right? Mm-hmm. It was necessarily Will Levis to play. He was okay, but his clear alpha wide receiver makes all the world of sense. And he was at $5,700 in that 5K range that we just kind of missed. And I guess I had him in a pivot or two, but if I had as much him as I had fucking Parker Washington and Jordan Addison, and yeah, I don't know why I have as much Parker Washington, and I might as well just give him Adonai Mitchell. Although that's not really what killed me. And I remember talking on our show how I was I didn't love Alvin Kamara, Derek Carr's going to throw it. Well, why didn't we try Marquez Valdes-Scantling? You know what I'm saying? Just saying. We never got there, but the thought was there. We just had to kind of go with the thought sometimes. So, like I said, mixed results. Net negative because of the way GPPs work, but it was kind of could have gone there, just didn't because of a few duds.
There are things that I felt like I could have done better this week. Not using a guy in Marquez Valdes-Scantling who was literally 0% owned in any contest is not one of the things that I'm going to blame myself for. But I think the move to Levis was really sharp. We actually saw Mason Rudolph and Calvin Ridley be optimal a couple weeks ago. So yeah, it wasn't as shocking as you would think, given the fact that I never even considered that one. So maybe we were a little bit too quick.
What was MVS's snap count the week before? I think that says everything right there. I didn't even look this up. I should have. If he was getting snap, okay, he was at 55% in what is it? That was week 10, so that was yesterday. 41%. Okay, I'm not going to hit myself too much. Yeah.
Well, not only that, but his role is purely deep ball, and Atlanta was excellent against the deep ball going into the week. They just basically didn't respect the deep ball at all from New Orleans. So that's how
Derek Carr going to throw it. That was the thought. Derek Carr going to throw it.
Yeah.
And I was I don't hate myself that much. I hate myself more for having so much of guys that I really didn't care that much about. The Parker Washingtons. I did like Sterling Shepard, and I can live with that garbage. The Bucks just were terrible. I don't say.
How was your week, bro?
The weekend was pretty good. I forgot the tally I had with Thursday night football, but for Sunday I went 8-6 VIP. My biggest bet of the season was Jaylen Warren over 6.5 rush attempts. I went 2.5 units on that, so that was lovely. It was a sweat-free cash. He ended up doubling the line. He had 14 carries. Then Jameson Williams last night, I took his receiving yards over. Gibbs, longest rush. Shout out to the FTN Stats Hub tool. That explosive run rate is not failing. It's amazing just targeting these same teams every week. He got it I believe in the fourth quarter too. So it was a little sweaty. He had a 15-yard carry. Then 2 plays later, he had the 20+ yarder. So
he had a play in, I want to say, the second quarter. It was a toss to the right from shotgun, a really cool design run, and he was half a step out of bounds on the sideline, turning the corner. I think it was like a 10, 11-yard run. If he's able to turn that corner, it's a 60-yarder, and we would have hit.
Yep.
But yeah, still got that hit in the end. Is just quite sweaty, but we will continue to look at all that explosive play rates because, as you said, Prop, those have been hitting at just a monstrous rate. Hopefully we can continue to do that. I see we've got a lot of people here in the chat. We appreciate all you guys jumping in once again. As always, many of them here for you, Prop. So we appreciate you being here once again. And I'll say for me, I think my yesterday was very similar to how my year as a whole has gone, where I feel like week in and week out, my DFS results are about as bad as they could be for the quality of the analysis that I've done. And so part of that yesterday was just like a mistake on my end. I was honing in on Juwan Jennings all week. I loved the fact that he was only $5,100 and he was a pivot off of the $5,300 chalk like Hopkins that I didn't love. He was a pivot off of Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, all those guys who I could see were gaining a little bit of popularity, although Deebo was then kind of falling as McCaffrey was going up. So it was a little bit tough there, but I pivoted to Deebo and then it ended up costing me quite a lot because I had a 2v2 that was most likely Bijan and Jennings versus Deebo and Rashad White. Rashad White was great, but he wasn't Bijan, and then Jennings actually outscored Deebo. So that one hurt, but it's kind of how it just goes sometimes. And the whole field was so packed together. Like I saw winning scores in my $200 single entry, like 147 DraftKings points. Those are the types of weeks that I usually do extremely well. And so it felt like a missed opportunity, but the analysis kind of across the board was good. It just ended up on the wrong one at the very end. But with that, I think let's jump in to tonight's game. This is a pretty fun matchup between Miami and Los Angeles. So, Prop, I'll kick it to you. Do you have a pick that you're really liking so far to start us off tonight?
Yes, sir. Actually, I got a spot that I love. It's going to be DeMarcus Robinson, pretty much everything. So the 2.5 receptions for my sports bettors is plus 108 on FanDuel. That's the best line you can get. And then it's plus 105 on DraftKings too, so not too far off. And then his receiving yards
1.09x on Underdog too. So basically the exact same thing. Really like that.
Yeah, then his receiving yards are at 27.5. But sometimes I like to just take the 25 plus. It's minus 132, but I'm not mad at people taking the 27.5 because I feel like you should be laddering them. I like them up to about 50 yards tonight. The FTM model supports that as well. As far as the projections, just giving it into the rationale, his last 9 out of 10 games playing with Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, he's averaging 54 receiving yards, and he's over in 9 straight games with both of them on the field. This season, in 3 games with them, 42 yards, 35 yards, and then 94 yards. Of course, he went off against Seattle last week. So that covers the receiving yards. The receptions, he's over in 7 out of 10, averaging 3.8 receptions per game. So I like there maybe a little receptions ladder. Probably, I probably would play it up to like 4 or 5. And then if you look at his targets with these 2 guys playing, he is averaging 6.1 targets per game, and over the last 5 with Puka and Cooper Kupp, he is averaging 7 targets per game. So, a lot of people probably pick him up in fantasy and things like that once one of these guys are ruled out. But he's much better with the Puka and Cooper on the field. That
is such a cool finding. I would not have guessed that, but that's the kind of thing that sports books are going to be wrong about. So I really like that edge there, and I think that makes me like the 2.5 receptions. Just get the 1.09x and kind of run with that, especially because here on Underdog, as you guys can see on the screen, it's 31.5, not 27.5. So it seems like maybe the receiving yards have been bet up a little bit, but those receptions still there with a ton of value, 1.09x. So why don't we lock that one in? And then I will take us to the Miami side, and I'm going to go with Tyreek Hill. And let's see what we have here. They actually took his receiving yards down for the moment. They'll be back. So I tell you what, why don't we do this? Since they're going to be back in a minute or two, TwoGun, why don't we kick it to you? You can give us your favorite pick.
It's funny. There's basically 2 guys that I really like tonight. And you got to remember, you guys got to remember, I'm at this point, 100% Showdown is my action. So I'm thinking it from a Showdown perspective. But I like Puka Nacua and I like Tua. And so I'm going to go with – I know Alex wanted to talk about Puka. So I'll talk about Tua. I like Tua's just his basic bitch yardage over. I think that he's going to throw the ball. People are kind of like – they've been using the running backs a lot, so it's easy to hate on him. But the fact that his yardage over isn't that high kind of makes me think he's throwing 300-plus yards tonight. This Rams defense is bad. It's just bad against the pass. That's what all of our DVO data says. Mm-hmm. I remember looking at it last week and talking about it, but I'm just going to go ahead and try to bring it up now. Let's see. It's funny, against the quarterback, it doesn't show that bad, but against wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2, it's both real bad. In the tight end, it's bad. So, yeah, I mean, that just shows you everything. Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle. I'm not going to like pound the table on this. I even kind of like Odell in Showdown. Mm-hmm. If they have a prop, I like it as well. They seem to be using him a little bit more and more. He's not out there for the snaps that much. He's not going to be like a John Mechie from last night. It's funny how much we liked Mechie the week before, and then of course I didn't even want to hear you say his name. Oh my goodness, man! Right, but if you think about like our analysis was kind of right, it just took a week.
Yeah,
and I don't think Odell's going to do what Mechie's did last night, but I think he is basically the wide receiver 3 on the team. And when he's out, he's got a lot more targets compared to like how many snaps he has. So and this is a revenge game, like 2,400. Yeah. You can find a worse captain, or you can find a worse flex. Let's just leave it at that.
We have a question here. What about Jonnu? You can see here. I was just about to ask him about Jonnu. Yeah, plus 11% for tight ends against the Rams, as you can see. So, yeah, I think this is another good spot for Jonnu. And we've also just seen this Miami offense is basically they do 3 things. They throw the ball downfield to Tyreek and Waddle. They throw the ball short to Waddle or to Achane, Tyreek, and Jonnu Smith, and they run the ball. Those are the only 3 things they do. So I think Jonnu's in a really good spot. And obviously Odell Beckham was going to continue to get some of those over the middle targets as well, particularly because Tyreek and Waddle can't seem to stay on the field too well right now. So he's going to get snaps there. I did check TwoGun. Underdog does not have anything up for Odell except for touchdowns right now. So maybe Pick 6 will add, and maybe Underdog will add.
Way more of a Showdown play, in my opinion.
I agree.
But yeah, if you can get like 15 to 20 yards on Odell, I would take it. I'm not like going to bid it up to like over 30 by any means.
Yeah.
But I do like it.
One other thing I'll say here is you mentioned off the top that it's not the greatest matchup for quarterbacks. You see this negative 3%, but then great for wide receiver 1s, great for wide receiver 2s, also solid for tight ends. And I think this is actually telling a pretty clear story of yardage against the Rams. Teams are able to throw for a lot of yards against them. This number is much more touchdown dependent than these numbers. So I think that's where you get the discrepancy. But then it's also because the Rams just aren't doing anything to keep quarterbacks from throwing to their top targets, which is why you see this big, giant negative 58% on wide receiver 3. So,
which is what Odell is, right? So
say that again?
Which is what Odell is. So maybe this is another week off. Like he doesn't do shit tonight, but then the next week he does something.
We were only 9 weeks early on Curtis Samuel. He finally had a good game. So we can afford to wait a little bit longer on Odell. Cause I do agree with you 100% that I think he's going to be a more relevant piece in this offense than any wide receiver 3 has been for them in the last few years. I certainly drafted him in best ball like that would be the case. So hopefully it does come to fruition, but I think this Puka line is also really interesting. And one of the reasons I love Puka here is Miami is super zone heavy. I believe they're playing the 23rd most, or they're 23rd in man rate. So playing a ton of zone, and Puka has kind of been the killer in zone. Last year, 2.7 yards per out run against zone. Cup was down at 2.1. So if there's a reason to think Puka versus Cup in tonight's game, it's actually that zone coverage, I think, and it makes me lean towards Puka. And one other thing I'll say is his numbers all the way down here at 67.5. He's going over this in 12 of 20 games. He's going over 100 in 8 of 20 games. So you can see on Underdog, they have this like new thing where you can just click these arrows next to the number and get alternate lines that way. And man, this 99.5 up at 2.16x, that's pretty intriguing to me. He's hit this in 40% of his games. 2.16x implies a percentage more like 26, 27%. So I think that number is really interesting as well. So let me ask you, TwoGun, do you have a preference between his standard 67.5 and any of these alternate lines?
Wait. Let me see what are these lines again.
So you can go to 79.5 at 1.3x. You can go 89.5 at 1.6, 99.5 at 2.16x, or just take the traditional at 67.5. One final thing I'll say here is, to me, like his range of outcomes seems a little bit more binary than most, where we don't necessarily know he's going to be the top target on any given night. If Cooper Kupp ends up with 12 receptions and Puka ends up with 4, we're not going to be shocked. But when he's the primary target, which even in games where they've both played, remember he put up 181 receiving yards in that playoff loss to Detroit with both of them on the field, he has tended to be the number one, in which case he seems to just be flying over 100 a lot of the time. So again, 8 of 20 games he's gone over 100. So that would be my lean, but I'm curious about yours.
It's funny. I just almost always just go with the basic line, just because I'm always like, they're probably juicing in ways I don't really, that's just kind of like how I think, but I don't hate it. Just leave it at that. I would probably put most on the basic line and then maybe a half bet on one of the higher lines is how I would go about it.
I like that. One thing I'll say, shout out to Underdog for this because they didn't need to do this. It's worth noting all of these alternates, with the actual exception of the 99.5, does have a lower on the other side. So you can see how much they are juicing or not juicing. And quite frankly, they're not juicing a ton. It's actually pretty favorable to us. So credit to them for creating the alternate lines in a fair way and not a predatory way.
Well, remember though, the way they get the predatory way is your total X, right?
Yep.
Like, we could talk about like the pick 6 payouts versus the underdog payouts. And part of the reason I did all those pick 8s on the main slate was I was getting 65X on like a 16X on underdog. So that's how they get you, is on the overall amount they pay you. They don't really screw you on the amount. Yeah. So I see what you're saying. Like, they're not juicing it at all in that way. They get you on the bill, right? The total multiplier.
Yep. Which is why, by the way,
actually, it makes more sense to kind of like pay up to close to 100 on him. Either they're going to stop him or they're not. Like, I just feel like Puka's their clear wide receiver 1 at this point, which I hate to say because he's young and Cooper Kupp's like old, and I love old guys because I'm old. But I think Puka's on pick 6, like they have the same yardage, and I'm like, no, like Puka should probably be like 20 yards more than Cooper Kupp at this point. Like, that's how they're drafted at best ball, and sometimes like best ball like thought process was right. It just takes a while to work itself out during the season.
Yeah, I think. By the way, it's a great point. It's also why we always go after the 3-pick and the 6-pick plays, because those are the ones that the math is just most in our favor, and we're not playing into a ton of juice on the underdog side. So a good reminder there. I'm going to go to my pick here, and notice we're going right back to these explosive plays. The deep throws here in Stats Hub, as you guys can see. Let me make this a little bit bigger for you guys. But we've got Los Angeles allowing the 4th highest deep completion rate. So this is not like how often are they completing deep passes when they throw it deep. This is how often are they completing deep passes compared to just how many passes they actually throw. So this is a huge number, really relevant number. And the deep receiving yards, they're also 5th, even though they've only got 7 games played. Every other team on the top of this list, as you can see here, 9 games, 10 games, 9. They're this big giant outlier here in 5th at only 7 games. So it's a great deep matchup. That is what Tyreek Hill does best. So I love this Tyreek number here at 75.5. And just like with Puka, I think we can also take this one up only to 89.5 so far. We'll see if they add more once he's officially ruled in. He might even be ruled out, right? He's questionable with this wrist issue. So I think that's one of the reasons why these numbers are too low. And it's also a reason to potentially go to the 1.4x multiplier. In here on the official play, I went with the standard one for Puka. So let's take the multiplier here with Tyreek. It kind of just mitigates a little bit of that wrist injury risk, because if it's bothering him, that's going to affect his median more than his ceiling. So I think these numbers just a little bit too low here for Tyreek. Obviously has a ton of potential. And I think it's also worth noting, like, he's averaging 103 yards per game with Tua as his quarterback since the start of last season. So 1.4x on 89.5 is pretty crazy. This number is too reactive to how much worse he's been without Tua than with Tua, in my opinion. Prop, what do you think of Tyreek tonight?
No, I like it. I'm looking at the numbers you said. They're giving up 13.2 yards per completion, so that's actually worse than the NFL. They rank 32nd. So I could, getting this will be Tua's third game back. Hopefully, Tyreek Hill plays. That's the only thing I'm actually concerned about with this one, especially with some of I see they took, Waddle and things like that off of the books. So it made me think that he might not play. But if he does play, I love this. I think it's a great spot to attack the Rams defense too. So, and honestly, one of those deep passes probably will result in a touchdown if you're doing like a correlation type bet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. This is an interesting question. Are we concerned with the passing attack of the Rams against a good pass defense in Miami? This is an interesting discussion. Let me bring up the DVOA data, because the DVOA data does show that it's a pretty tough defense to do a ton against passing wise, right? So we have this negative 26% for quarterbacks, basically negative numbers across the board, and actually negative numbers are across the board in the passing game. But let's remember how inept this Miami offense was in the games without Tua, and teams just weren't, they didn't have to do anything against them. So they were running the ball. Remember that Tennessee game, which was one of the absolute ugliest football games that we have ever experienced. Since Tua has come back, that first game, both Trey McBride and Marvin Harrison Jr. went over 100 yards. We've actually seen that I don't think this Miami pass defense is anywhere near as good as their number suggests, is basically the main point that I'm trying to make. I'm curious if you feel the same way, Prop.
Yeah, I think I would trust the DVOA numbers more so than I would trust. I guess you could say what the metrics will show you when you look at what they're giving up and things like that. So, and it could be due for some negative regression for that defense.
What do you think about that, TwoGun?
Sorry, I was like looking at a bunch of other shit and I got based.
So the question is, how impactful do you think the weeks where Tua wasn't playing and teams against Miami?
Oh God, you can't take into account any of that data. Yeah,
that's my thought. And
like we're talking like Tua's like a quarterback that just fucking chucks it, and then he had like four stringers. Like they didn't go from like first stringer to like elite. Like this wasn't like Tua got injured and then they went to like Andy Dalton or Jameis. They like were basically picking up guys off of the other team's practice squads. It's you can't compare it at all. And yeah, they also have great running backs on Miami. So it just changes their game plan completely. They're like, okay, screw it. We're going to try to use our good running backs as much as you can't think about it at all. The only thing you have to ask yourself is like, are they just like, have they thrown in the towel on the season at 2-6? I don't think they have. I think two are going to throw it. Kind of like sometimes my most basic analysis is my best analysis. And I love to say so-and-so is going to throw it. But if I remind you, Alex, the reason we got Mike Evans week 2017, a good little $700,000 lift for yours truly, was my deep thought of Tom Brady's going to throw it. Tom Brady's not going to run it. Tom Brady's going to throw it. We're going to throw it to him. I can see throw it to Mike Evans because Tom Brady's going to throw it. And I think two are going to throw it. Two are going to throw it. Who's he going to throw it to? I don't know. He's going to probably throw it to all those guys.
So as far as the Miami defense is concerned, like here on Stats Hub, one thing that's really, really cool that we can do is we can sort by whatever weeks we want. So here I'm only taking weeks 1, 2, 8, and 9, the weeks where Tua actually played. And look at this. Miami had the 4th worst defensive success rate against the pass. This is in passing advanced. Then you go to defense. They had the worst EPA per play against the pass. So again, this defense is severely overrated by their passing numbers on the season as a whole, because when teams played them and Tua wasn't the quarterback, they didn't have to do a damn thing. So they just weren't throwing the ball. They weren't throwing it aggressively. They weren't trying to push it downfield. They basically weren't doing anything that they are being asked to do now that Tua is back and this Miami offense is going to put up points. So I think that's just another reason to be high on DeMarcus Robinson, to be high on Puka Nacua, because everyone is kind of overestimating just how good this Miami defense has actually been.
Yeah, I mean, if the game's gonna be in a shootout, what if this game's not a shootout? What game is it gonna be? You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of how I view it.
I would love a shootout.
They're always more fun to watch. I mean, maybe we even get like a Tyreek Jamar Chase type night here, which would be pretty great from a best ball perspective for me as well. But let's jump to any other picks. We've got 3 here. Prop, do you have a 4th for us?
Yeah, I like Devon Achane over 53.5 rushing yards. We have him projected for 70 on FTN, and usually when I see something like that, I'm running to put the ticket in. So looking at this Rams rush defense, 135.1 rushing yards per game allowed. That's 8th most in the NFL. On top of the yards per completion that we were talking about. So, the same way I talk about with the Steelers. I bet on their running backs and the longest reception for those receivers, which I think all of them cashed the longest reception yesterday for Pittsburgh. It's the same thought process, for me betting-wise. If your rush defense is bad and you're facing elite running backs or a team that, has that run-first mentality, I'm going to take the rushing attempts or yards, and I'm going to take longest reception. So we got the longest reception with Tyreek. I think Achane will have success on the ground. What does that do? Set up the play action shots for those the deep shot to Tyreek or whoever else gets it. So 5th most rush attempts against the Rams defense. And then the pass defense, they're allowing 225 yards per game. That's 9th worst. So you could attack them in any way, and the 5th most passing touchdowns, which is why I liked the Tyreek Hill touchdown. So Devon Achane over his rushing yards, I will play it up to 70, and I think that goes well with your Tyreek Hill play.
Yeah, Rams also 23rd in adjusted line yards allowed, as you can see here on the screen. So I'm with you there. He is 57.5 on Underdog. So let me throw a couple more ideas at you here. First of all, it sounds like you would still play that 57.5 number, but do you prefer either 12.5 rushing attempts at 0.92x, or it also strikes me 13.5 for his longest run? Seems really low for the kind of explosive player that Achane is. Where's your preference here?
So I could get there, but the rush attempts and the longest rushes, he's not been covering this season. 2 and 8 to the rush attempts, because it doesn't take him many yards to get it right, but it's a lot of 10-yard carries instead of him breaking off the 15 pieces. So he had a 47-yard carry against the Cardinals, 15 yards against the Colts, and then 17 yards against the Bills. But that's only 3 and 8 to this over. So I'd much rather just play the rushing yards, because he's getting probably like 8 to 10 yards a pop, and that way we're not worried about the exact number of the attempts or the longest rush.
I believe that I am with you. Let's go double check this explosive rush data as well. So first we can do explosive run percent, and we can see LA way down here, 25th. So in this case, like the higher the quote unquote rank, the more favorable the matchup. So I'm with you here. It's been hard for teams to get the explosive runs against this LA team, and you can also see the same thing here on the adjusted line yards. 23rd in adjusted line yards, but then 5th in open field yards allowed. So I think your read here is pretty spot on with what I'm seeing. So I like this higher than 57.5 number on Achane. Anything else from you two, though?
I don't really think so.
Is there anything you can find for
like I
Tua
said,
that
I
you can-
really just have two thoughts on this slate, and we'll see how right they are. Tua going to throw it. Puka Nacua there is the wires, is the Ram I want as the ring back. That's really all I got. So we can keep every time you come to me, I'm just going to say the same thing. Like, oh, what else do you want from me? Like, it's one game. Like,
No, I actually think it's an important point to make. Like, we don't need to force in a 6-pick play every single time. In fact, I'm struggling to find anything else that I love as well. So we could play this as a 4-pick. We could just leave it as a 3-pick. You could even run just a series of 3-pick plays, but for the time being,
what's interesting is Mostert has been the one covering his longest rush and his rush attempts at 7.5, 4 straight. We got a weak rush defense, so he's going to be involved. It's not going to be just A-Chain. And you're getting a softer number with everything with Mostert. His longest rush is at 10.5. And he's over in 4 straight games.
Yeah. He's not on the field as much, but whenever he's on the field, they're generally giving him the ball.
Yeah.
My biggest concern is he had a lost fumble last week, and then in the immediate drive after that, we saw Jalen Wright for the first time in the game. Now, Mostert did get carries after that, but it's just enough to make me wonder, like, what if it's Achane and Wright this game and Mostert barely plays, or is just the third down pass protection back, or things like that, or just the goal line back. So I'm a little bit hesitant, but I'm seeing what you guys are seeing, and these numbers are strikingly low. It's almost like these numbers are already factoring in that possibility, and we should still be firing. So I'm torn. If you guys really like this, I'm happy to put in anything for him here. I think my preference would just be the over 30.5 rushing yards. We don't have rush attempts for him here on Underdog. So what do you think, Prop? Is this worth it? Or are you just worried enough about Jalen Wright kind of taking some of the work? And also maybe some potential inverse correlation between Mostert and Achane. I think that this offense is good enough for all of the above to hit, but we already have an over on Tyreek. We already have an over on Achane. Do we want to add another one here with Mostert?
So wait, on the Rams side, what do we have? Puka and Robinson?
Yes.
So we got 4. We don't have to add Mostert, but as far as Jalen Wright, I'm not concerned with that brother at all.
Okay.
So,
okay.
Especially not when it comes to Mostert.
Well, let's do this then. Let's think about Mostert. We can add him. As we said, we love the 3-pick plays. We love the 6-pick plays. If we can come up with a 6th, then let's do it. Let's add Mostert to make it a 6-pick play. If we can't find a 6 that we like, we can just leave it here. So, Prop, do you have any other leans from this game that maybe we can go to?
No, because we already got Puka, so I liked his receptions, and yeah, that's it. I'll give you a quick update too on our projections with the Mostert. We actually have him for 8 carries for 33 yards, so he's in line to cover too.
Yeah.
But yeah, nothing else I would add.
I've got an interesting one. Let's look at this together. Let's go to the stats. Let's go check out some of the explosive passing stuff. And let me refresh this real quick. I think that it might be worth taking an under on Cooper Kupp's longest reception. So let's take a look here at the explosive pass numbers. Now, again, Miami's going to look worse than they actually are here, but they have not given up many explosive passes. The one concern, and I think this is actually another like really good example of how this Miami defense is probably being overrated. They've allowed the 4th highest completion percentage when teams do throw deep. So if we think that it's Puka, if Puka is going off on this really big game, there's a good chance that he's not going to get the explosives. So I think the under 21.5 on Cooper Kupp's longest reception is interesting. Let's see. Do we have any? Can we grab any quick data on how often he has hit that?
Cooper Kupp?
Yeah.
Yeah, I got it
21
for
and a
you.
half.
Yeah.
So he's hit it in 3 or 4 games this year, going back to
Yep.
last season, 8, 12, 62, 34, then 13, 7, 11, 34, 9, 24, 49, 39. So it seems like this is a pretty fair line, pretty good line. I lean under, but it's not a strong take. What do you guys think? I'll start with you, Prop.
Yeah, I looked at that first, and I honestly was going to play Demarcus Robinson longest reception instead, but I kind of, like I said, like when I messaged you in the Slack, it's Demarcus Robinson everything, bro. It's because all of his numbers are depressed, and he plays his best with them. And I think, well, when you look at Cup's yards, it's not steep at all. It's the price is great, but the numbers that we were seeing for the Miami defense, I was kind of like on the fence, the same way we're talking about now, like how real is it? But with Stafford playing, I can't be mad at adding Cup's longest reception, especially him going over in 3 straight weeks. So I'm not mad at it at all. If we were to add it, I'll be fine with it.
So you like the over on the longest reception?
Oh, y'all, I'm sorry. You talking about the under. I would be scared.
I was actually leaning under. I mean, so like just think of it this way. We already have Robinson to get at least 3 receptions. We already are saying Puka is the guy who's kind of dominating the game. It's going to be a lot harder for Cup to get the longest reception if he's not even being targeted that often. So I like it. I don't love it.
Yeah.
What do you think here, TwoGun?
Yeah, it's funny because I'm sorry, I'm just like kind of like going on. I'm living in my own world right now because I'll hear something like you probably gonna hear my kids screaming in the background. I do, and I'm just thinking, well, Pop's got a kid. I wonder if he's got 3+ kids like I do. And
Yeah.
how many kids? How many you got, Pop?
3.
3. Okay, so we get each other.
Yeah.
Alex is living in that like bachelor no kid life, so you know.
Man.
Anyways, but yeah, I kind of like what Pop's saying about Demarcus Robinson. I didn't have him in my showdown lineups, but you know, maybe he does his best as a wide receiver 3. You get what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah,
people think he's better. Like, oh, there's gonna be more hands to feed, but it's like, nah. You know, he just needs that big player too. So yeah, I kind of like. It's almost like I like his like when you're talking about his with Puka Nacua like a juiced over or like a regular. If there's a guy that I like a juiced over on, it's Demarcus Robinson. And when you like a juiced over or a nothing, guess what that's good for? It's good for a GPP. Mm-hmm. So I'm kind of liking. I kind of want to have Demarcus Robinson. I have 3 lineups going. I'm going to have him at least 1. I wonder how popular he'll be, but I'm just saying I want to have him in at least 1, and then I'll like look at the ownership to go from there to see if I'm like under or not. I don't want to be under him. You know what I mean?
Why don't we do this then? Why don't we add the Cup lower on his longest reception, add Puka, but let's take one of these alternate lines for Puka. TwoGun, why don't you pick the alternate? Do you want to go all the way to 99.5? Do you want to stop at 89.5?
No, let's just, if we're taking Puka and Demarcus Robinson, then let's just take the basic pitch line.
Okay. All right. I was just thinking it makes the whoops, I shouldn't have done that. It makes the Cup under on longest reception better, but I think it's still good. So we're going over there, and now let's go add Mostert as well. And we're basically saying now that Miami just has a really good offensive game. They're explosive. They run the ball well. They run it through both Mostert and Achane. When they throw, it's a lot of Tyreek Hill, and he's having a successful game. And as a response, LA has to throw it a lot, but they're not able to get like either the crazy explosives to Cup, or everything just goes to Demarcus Robinson and Puka Nacua, so Cup fails that way. I think this now actually tells a pretty good story, and this 6-pick play gets all the way up to 34.3x. So I think this is a really solid one for the official 6-pick play. For the Millie, little recap here: Demarcus Robinson over 2.5 receptions, Von Achane over 57.5 rushing yards, Tyreek over 89.5 receiving yards, bumped all the way up to 1.4x. That's an alternate line. Cooper Kupp under 21.5 longest reception, Puka over 67.5 receiving yards, and Raheem Mostert over 30.5.
I'm not going to hate on this 6-pick play because I kind of stayed out of most of it. We don't have like a two-gun blessing here because two-gun's thought is Tua going to throw it. And we have his running backs running.
Tyreek.
It's not a two-gun play. I'm cool with it. I get it. Especially, Mostert at 30 yards, I get it. I'm not going to use Mostert in Showdown because Showdown is all about ceiling, and 30.5 yards is, dude, it's 30.5 yards. That could be like 5 carries. So I'm not hating on the pick six play. I'm just saying it's not really a two-gun play. It's y'all's play. That's fine. This is more y'all's thing than me. I'm, at this point, pure Showdown guy, and I can do my full thoughts. But my only thought on the Showdown was Tua going to throw it.
Well, that's a perfect segue because let's talk some of the Showdown now. I want to bring up the Showdown article, share some of this data with you guys here. So, TwoGun, you're going to like seeing this. We have some really strong numbers here for being heavy on the Miami side in Showdown. So if Tua's going to throw, he's going to throw to a bunch of his guys, and it helps to be heavy on Miami. We also see here in the player level data, the best leverage at the captain position comes from either Tyreek Hill or Tua. So it sounds like your thoughts are right in line with our simmed data for the Showdown. So what are you thinking captain-wise? Is it just Tua as the captain, or are you saying he's going to throw and therefore either Tyreek or Waddle is going to be the optimal captain for you?
Tyreek Hill just got ruled in too.
Oh, what did you say?
Tyreek just got ruled in. He's going to play.
Okay. So I have 3 lineups. I was screwing on having a 4th. I've decided to stick with 3. And I have Tua as captain in 1, Puka captain in 1, Tyreek captain in 1. And I thought about having a 5-1 Dolphins, but I'm actually generally all in 4-2 Dolphins or 3-3 because kind of like you were alluding to in your article, if Tua's going to throw it, you got to have at least 2 as pass catchers. But if I have a sort of situation where I just have Tyreek Hill as a pass catcher and I don't have Waddle or Achane in there. I have the only other pass catcher is Odell, which is, he's got a 10-point maximum. Okay. Then I'd rather go with the Tyreek Hill explosive game. But yeah, those are basically those are the 3. I really like Puka and Tua in this game, and I just respect Tyreek Hill for being Tyreek Hill. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm with you on this. Real quick, I want to shout out Albert. For this comment, if you bump up Achane rushing yards to 59.5, you get to a 1.1x multiplier. I think that's worth it for just 2 yards for sure. Also, shout out to Albert. Big week in the DFS streets. Just had a great NBA night last night. So well done, Albert. And hopefully we get more of the same tonight. And I'm with you, TwoGun. I just think I want to be heavy on this Miami team.
The chat is getting a bad echo.
Who's echo? My echo?
I'm not sure.
TwoGun, why don't you mute yourself? I can also do it if you need. So I think one thing we talked about last time, Prop, if you remember, is that sometimes these onslaught lineups, the 5 Dolphins and only 1 Ram, they don't need a blowout to happen. They can just be that the either production on the Los Angeles side is super concentrated, or it means that Miami's just dominating ball control, right? They are just continuously getting first down after first down. That Los Angeles team is not able to get onto the field. And I think that just means we can be heavy on the Miami side tonight pretty well. I'll kick it to you. Prop. What's your thoughts here from a Showdown perspective?
My bad. I was trying to check out for the echo, but I don't hear any echo when I watch it on YouTube. It's weird. I don't know why everybody's hearing the echo. What was the question that you asked? Because I was trying to check on the echo. I'm sorry. Wait, can you hear me? Oh,
yeah, I think there's a chance that it was from the screen share. So I muted the screen share, and that might be helping.
I'm echoing too.
Let's see now. Just go ahead, Prop. I'll mute too.
Well, what was your question though? Because I was checking out the echo.
Oh, just what are your showdown thoughts? We seem to be pretty heavy on the Miami side. Are you seeing the same thing from Showdown?
If I had to go Showdown, you mean like as far as a captain? I would go with Puka in this spot. I'm sure he's expensive though.
He's expensive. Let me blow this up for you guys. So we've got him projected to be optimal 16% of the time, projected ownership at 16.2%. I think that's still solid. But by no means am I saying don't use him. I think it's nice that our captain data is also like significantly higher on Puka than it is Cup. You can see we've got this inverse leverage, negative leverage for Cup. So I think on the Los Angeles side, there's no question that Puka is the best captain.
Yeah. So yeah, I will go. If I had to do a captain, I will have Puka, but I definitely will have DeMarcus Robinson in my lineups if I'm playing this.
I like that call. TwoGun, when you are going heavy on the Miami side, who are your favorite bringbacks for Los Angeles?
So something I want to make clear, I don't have any 5-1 Dolphins. If my thought is Tua going to throw it, and guys tell me if I'm echoing because I haven't heard an echo. If Tua's going to throw it, he's not going to keep throwing it. They're blowing out the they're blowing out the Rams. So all my lineups are 4-2 to 3-3. Besides, I have Puka in all my lineups right now, so he's obviously my favorite bring back. But otherwise, I'm just kind of mixing it up. I'm mixing it up with having Kyron Williams in one, obviously DeMarcus Robinson in one, and if I'm using Stafford, I don't use the kicker, Cardi. If I'm using Stafford, I don't have Cardi. If I'm not using Stafford, I'll probably have Cardi. So that's kind of how I'm going about my lineups. I'm not going for any sort of beat down. Keep in mind, my other host on once a week is Brooke Cromer, who's a big Rams and Bills fan, and she's probably not watching this show. But if she was, and I talked about how I want to have Miami Dolphins beat down, then I'm going to get yelled at by a blonde woman, and I don't like doing that. When you're older like me and you've gotten yelled at over the years, you just want to not get yelled at by women. So, anyways, I like a close game. Even though I like the more of the value on the Dolphins side, I like some of these players more. It just doesn't, unless you want to go running back heavy, and like with the Dolphins defense, and just say the Rams don't do anything, and it's just a low scoring game. Like that's to me is how you do a 5-1 Dolphins, and I'm just not there. So that's why I'm 3-3, 4-2. I'm definitely not going 5-1 Rams though, like the other way. To me, then there's.
Yeah, I like that. Great call here, Prop. If everyone can hit that like button for us, that's super helpful. Subscribe to the channel. Get all kinds of shows here at FTN. It's kind of one of the strengths for us is whether you like DFS, whether you like betting, there's something for you. Whether you like football or basketball, there's always something for you on the FTN Network YouTube channel. One of the things that strikes me here in this captain data is that there's actually some really strong leverage on some of these really cheap guys. Usually we see all of the good leverage on the expensive captains, but you can see here, Jonnu Smith showing up as optimal almost twice as often as we're projecting him to be owned. DeMarcus Robinson, optimal 2.1% of the time. Looks like he's going to be captain 0.1% of lineups. So I think that's interesting for a couple reasons, because I think that number one, it shows that there's a chance that, those guys are just underowned given their own upside, but it also speaks to the fact that there are a lot of really good pay up options in this game. Achane, Tyreek, Puka, Kupp, Kyron, and of course the quarterbacks as well, that it just might be one of those slates where the optimal captain isn't necessarily the guy who does the best for his price. It's the best cheap guy who allows you to use 4 of the studs instead of 3 of the studs, something like that. So I'm definitely going to explore.
I'm going to hop in there. Like I'm probably going to. I don't know. I have a Tyreek. I like looking at my lineups and just like it's weird to like say this, but like I probably will take out my Puka captain one and put in one of these cheap guys, because that's basically what you use a cheap captain for. It's to make it stud. And if there's a game where I want to do that, it's this game. and I don't have that type of lineup yet, so I think I got to do that for at least one of mine.
That Prop, what do you think of that thought? You mentioned earlier that Puka would probably be your captain, but now that we see this data on Demarcus Robinson, knowing how much you love Demarcus, are you just going to go there for your captain and then fit Tyreek and Achane and Puka, something like that?
I think something like that would be that's kind of how you well, I haven't won big like TwoGun, of course, but I think those are the risks you take to get the bigger payouts.
Yeah.
So I would love that because, like I said, we haven't projected for a little over 40 yards. So that means he could be good for 50, you know. Then I like the receptions too. So I think he can pile up the points and maybe even get into the end zone. And then with him being so cheap, you have so much more to spend to get the powerful guys in the lineup too. So I would love that.
Yeah, I mean, I just checked. Like, if you have Demarcus Robinson as your captain, you can very easily get Tyreek and Puka and Achane. And one of the quarterbacks you could do, if you've got Demarcus Robinson captain and you have Puka Nacua, you probably want Stafford in there. So you could very easily do Demarcus Robinson, Tyreek, Puka, Achane, Stafford, and now you have 4,600 for your last spot. That could be Jonnu. It could be the Rams, Dolphins, Parkinson, Tutu Atwell, a lot of different options there. So I think that kind of build is really intriguing. And usually that type of build doesn't intrigue me because there aren't usually this many expensive guys who have this much upside, but they all have the PPR upside. They all have big play upside. It's just, it's one of those slates where both of these teams like have really concentrated production. And so if you can find that one peripheral guy to do really well, in this case, we'd be saying it's Demarcus Robinson, then everything else can kind of just really fall into place pretty easily. Brian saying it's OBJ night upon his return. So, I mean, like, look, maybe OBJ is the cheap guy, right? You could easily get 4 studs with OBJ, even cheaper than Robinson. So I kind of like this cheap captain thought more on this slate than I have on any other showdown this season. So that makes it pretty fun to go build some lineups.
To interrupt, what I like about Demarcus, like, I was the OBJ guy. I didn't really get into Demarcus Robinson until we started talking about it. OBJ just doesn't have that ceiling yet. Like, he's just not on the field that much. Demarcus Robinson does have a 20-point ceiling. So that's why I like him as a captain. OBJ, not so much. And I think at the end of the day, and Demarcus Robinson, he has a 20-point ceiling and a 0.4. So if he's in your lineup as a flex, he's probably screwing it because he's expensive enough where, like, he can sink your lineup. So you might as well just go all in. That's why I kind of like him in particular.
Yeah, to that point, Demarcus Robinson leads the team in average depth of target over 16 yards. So when he hits, he's going to hit in a big way. Also seems to be scoring quite a few touchdowns for them as well. Back-to-back multi-touchdown games for him. Can he make it 3 in a row? Unlikely, but it's also unlikely that anyone that cheap ever scores multiple touchdowns. So you can still get there with, 5 receptions, 80 yards might do it. You could get there with 3 receptions, 60 yards, and a touchdown might do it, depending on how everybody else does. So I think he makes for a fantastic captain. I would even maybe say I like Demarcus Robinson more as a captain than I do a flex. Something I always try to kind of identify who are those guys who make more sense as a captain than a flex. We nailed that with DeAndre Hopkins last Monday. Turned out to be the perfect captain, and maybe Demarcus Robinson is that guy on this slate. Any final thoughts here on the Showdown PropGod?
No, nothing else for me. I do want to know that they said Tyreek Hill's playing through a torn ligament for the people, I don't know if that concerns anyone or not, but that just came out as well. So
it is. I think it's extremely helpful that it's a wrist injury and not a ligament in his ankle or something around his knee or like a groin that's going to hurt his explosiveness, anything like that. It's seemingly just, can he tolerate the pain? I'm not going to be surprised if like he takes himself out after each tackle, something like that. But I think it seems like he should be good to go. And certainly he's got the explosiveness. And that's kind of what I care about the most when looking at him, both from a Showdown perspective and from a props perspective. Any closing thoughts from you, TwoGun?
Okay. A little bit. It's very generic thoughts, but we're just always, whenever you build a lineup in a game like this, remember what you're trying to say with the lineup, what type of scoring game you want. Because this is a high scoring game at the outset, right? If you're going to try to go defenses and you're trying to use, you're trying to do 5. If you're using a 5-1 at all, that means not high scoring game. It means domination. If you are using a kicker, it means don't use the quarterback. If you're using a quarterback as the captain, make sure. I feel like it should not be more than a 4-2, because he needs to throw it. So basically, just remember what you're doing with your captain. And I guess I see Achan's optimal a lot. Again, I don't really love that outside of a beatdown on the Dolphins, because I know he's used a lot in the passing game and he has a lot of high, explosive plays, but I guess just try to remember what you're saying with your lineup.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's always worth thinking about. And I think another thing is, so far we haven't seen the Tyreek explosion this season when Achan explodes. In week 1, remember, Achan did have 7 receptions for 76 yards, so he did pretty well, 23 DraftKings points when Tyreek had his big game. But since then, when Achan has exploded, like last week with the 2 touchdowns, with the 8 receptions, we haven't seen that Tyreek explosion. So I think biggest takeaway there is you can use them together when they're both flex options. But I don't think I would want either one when I captain the other. So just something else to think about. If Tyreek is my captain, maybe then I'm going to Mostert instead of Achan if I want a piece of that rushing attack, something like that. But I think that's just another thing to think about. Somewhat of a small sample. We can also go back to last year and see mostly the same trend. So I think it's something that I do want to follow in my lineup, but it's not like some super strong rule that I think everyone needs to follow. With that, I think reminder to everybody, PropGod will be live at 7:00 for Trenches, talking through all of the bets that he can come up with and all of his guests can come up with. So make sure you join that. Thank you once again for everybody tuning in here. Thank you for hitting the like button, subscribing to the channel. We will catch you next time back Thursday, 5:30.